So I'm going to say those things again. Hi, my name is Terry Olson, and I'm just completing my 7th and last year as the Director of Education for the American Tapestry Alliance. It's been a great experience, and I encourage all of our members to find something that you can volunteer for with the ATA. Last fall, ATA decided to try something new, the Ambassador Program. The idea is to welcome and to learn something about the people and weaving traditions of ethnic cultures, to broaden our views of the world, to come to know a little outside our own traditions, whatever they may be. When I did a talk about wedge weave in 2020, I came across Kevin Aspaas on Instagram, thanks to Janet Gross. We decided to ask Kevin if he would be our first ambassador, and he agreed. In addition to this talk, Kevin has been offered a 1-year membership in the American Tapestry Alliance and a chance to write an article for our website or tapestry topics. And I hope he takes us up on that. I would like to see that. Kevin is a young man in his mid-20s who lives in Shiprock, New Mexico. I think partly because he is young, partly because he lives in town, and partly because he is one smart cookie. He is quite active on social media. From his public presence, I learned some facts about his life. Kevin's website shares that he utilizes the traditional Diné sheep to loom weaving process. He is best known for producing old style Navajo wedge weave techniques alongside other Navajo traditional and contemporary textiles. Kevin currently serves as president of the Diné-led nonprofit organization, Diné Bay Lina, I'm probably not saying that right, which focuses on promoting and preserving the Navajo lifeways through weaving, fiber arts, shepherding, food, and community outreach. In a 2018 article from New Mexico Magazine, I learned that Kevin learned to weave from his mother, which connected him to the grandmother he had never met. He apprenticed with master weaver Roy Cady, who invited Aspaas and other promising young weavers to his sheep camp to learn both the art of weaving and the cultural practice of raising sheep and spinning wool. Kevin learned the wedge weave technique, saying he couldn't stop looking at the design because it was a zigzag pattern. He points out that Navajo weavers created it. No one taught them to weave that. Kevin's wedge weave rugs have received prizes, including a recent twill pattern wedge weave that we will see today. Kevin also started a sheep herd and is celebrating the birth of lambs this month. Last year, his Instagram feed showed his first successful spinning of cotton that he had grown. My favorite photo, though, is of his blue hands brought up from an indigo dye bath. I don't want to take any more of Kevin's time, so please welcome Kevin Aspaas, the first ATA ambassador. Hi, Kevin.
Hi, Terry. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining in, taking time out of your day to listen to me talk. I want to thank the American Tapestry Alliance for reaching out and asking me to be their first ambassador. It's a very exciting opportunity to be able to share the Navajo culture, Navajo weaving, and what it's like, what I've learned in my experiences, and everything that I've been on my journey for the past 5 or 6 years now. So right now I will get right into it, into my PowerPoint. I just want to warn you guys, most of it is pictures. I do not like to do too much words on the PowerPoints. So I will share. See if I can pull it up. Okay, hold on. Let me get this little bar down below and we will start. Okay, good morning, everyone. I'll start off with my introduction in my native language. Yate she Kevin Aspaas Sinashia. Kiani Nishledo Twitch eating bashes chain as a lana dash che auto hushlish nationale. Aqua not anines tote adishawan. Though in the Nadine has tranche nache. A hot out nanshle. What I said in my native language was, my name is Kevin Aspaas, and my clans are here on the screen. Navajos are a matrilineal society. All of our clans come from our mothers and our grandmothers. So that's, yeah, so our clans are passed down in that way. So I am of the Towering House clan. That's the clan I will carry and pass on. I'm born for the Bitterwater people, Bitterwater clan. That clan comes from my dad, and my maternal grandfathers are of the Many Goats clan, and my paternal grandfathers are of the Mud People clan. And in Navajo society, traditionally, though a lot of the ownership of livestock, of land, of the children are through our mothers, our grandmothers. They are the ones who have the first and last say in a lot of decision making in the decision making processes. So a lot of times, you know, not to say that the men don't have a say in those decisions, but you know, women ultimately do have the ultimate the last say in a lot of decision making processes. So when it comes to, you know, decisions that I'm personally making, I personally, you know, reach out to my mom or my sisters and, you know, my aunts when it comes to, you know, important decisions or important advice. I'm 26 years old and I live in Shiprock, New Mexico. Yeah. I want to start off my presentation by, you know, acknowledging where we got weaving from a traditional cultural aspect. In the Navajo culture, we got a lot of our weaving, you know, in our creation stories, we got our weaving from the weaving technology, the weaving, the wisdom, the techniques and everything from our deities, Spider Woman and Spider Man. Here on this photo on the screen, is a photo of a very holy place in the center of the Navajo Nation. The canyon itself is called Canyon Diné. In Navajo language, it's called Sayet, which means within the rocks. The two rock formations in the middle of the screen are known as Spider Rock, and that's where it's said to be where the deities Spider Woman and Spider Man lived, and that's where everything, the center of our weaving culture comes from, where we are the mother of all of our Navajo people. She learned the knowledge and the wisdom from those two beings and brought it down to us, to the people. So yeah, it's a very holy place. You know, in general, it's a very holy place to Navajo people. The canyon is, but you know, specifically to weavers, a lot of weavers, you know, come to this area, come to this part of the canyon, and they'll, you know, put down, they'll say prayers and offerings to it, and you know, so they'll be blessed by the deities who brought us weaving, and to be able to further their own weaving and their own creativity. It's also a national park. So if you look up Canyon Diné online, the website will pop up. There are various lookouts along the rims of the canyon, and you'll be able to go and see these places. Spider Rock is it's probably about 15 miles up the canyon. It's the last lookout point. This is the last lookout point of the park. Navajo weaving, you know, when we first started weaving, a lot of it was utilitarian. So the dresses on these women right here are woven rug dresses. And like I said, a lot of our weavings were utilitarian, and a lot of different cultures, a lot of our weavings are utilitarian. You know, we wove for one another. We created blankets, clothing, pieces of clothing, personal adornment. And a lot of these photos, though, have a very sad backstory. They are taken from our time of imprisonment at a prisoner of war camp in the eastern part of New Mexico. And now in English, you know, or it's called Bosque Redondo, but in Navajo we call it Huelte. And you know, during that time, those 4 years of imprisonment were a very tough time for Navajo people, but also when I look at that time period, there's a lot of magnificent pieces that came out of that time, came out of those places. And it's just incredible to realize the resiliency of the Navajo people, and their ability to create and provide for one another. Here's a photo of a Navajo encampment. We were a nomadic people, but after the introduction of sheep, that really kind of slowed us down. Whereas, we were following wild game. Now that we had come into contact with sheep, obtained the sheep, saw its usefulness. We could use it for meat. We could use it for wool, for weaving blankets and stuff like that. And yeah, here's another photos of utilitarian wear. I personally have a very I really enjoy looking at personal attire when it comes to Navajo weavings. That's one of my specialties, I guess you could say. So when I look at old photos, I tend to look more at the dresses that were woven. There's very simplistic designs, the design elements. A lot of it was just stripes. And prior to the trading post era, a lot of our weavings did involve mainly just stripes. And they're very beautiful, very simplistic pieces. And utilitarian wear, we not only wove for ourselves, for our own people, we also wove for our animals, our horses. So in this photo, the weaver and the woman sitting at the loom, she is weaving a saddle blanket, a twill blanket, and you can kind of see how many heddles and one shed. She has 3 heddles and 1 shed on the photo. And I've heard stories, of people, we weave for our horses because they enjoy to look, they want to look beautiful too. They want personal adornment too. So we weave for them as well, and we want these pieces to look nice and look good so they can show it off too, and they can be proud of it. So the animals can be proud of what they're wearing as well. And here's an example of a Navajo woman spinning wool in what it looks like a summer dwelling, what we call a chaha'o, a shade house. Navajo lap spindles and spindles in general in the Southwest are very simple. I don't like to use the word primitive, but it's very simple tool that's used. It's just a long spindle shaft with the whorl that's spun on, the bottom of the spindle is put on the ground, and the top of the spindle is rolled on your lap. And they say when you spin wool, when you spin cotton, you always spin towards yourself to bring blessings, to bring good things to you. And this is a photo of what is known as a regional style weaving. I'm not sure which regional style this comes from, but when we look at Navajo weaving nowadays, a lot of popular regional styles come from Two Gray Hills, the Ganado Red, Klagetoh, Tisnasbus rugs. There's all these. When the trading posts were set up on the reservations, the trading posts, wherever they were at, the weavers in that area nearest to that trading post would specialize in one style only. So if you lived within the Two Gray Hills area, you were weaving Two Gray Hills rugs primarily. If you lived in Ganado area, you were weaving Ganado Red rugs primarily. And trading posts had their own weavers. And if you were from a different area of the reservation and if you were from Ganado and you wove a Two Gray Hills, and then you went to Two Gray Hills to sell a rug, there were very low chances of the trader buying from you because you weren't from that area and you weren't, quote unquote, trained to be weaving a Two Gray Hills. So simple nuances like that. And the trading posts did really have a big effect on Navajo weaving. on what it is today. Nowadays, we look at it as traditional weaving, traditional Navajo weaving, but back then, that was the innovative type of weaving. Those were innovations that they were making. They were adapting to what was, to the economy, I guess you could say, what was going to be bought and what was going to be providing for them. And so as we see throughout the, throughout the generations, the many years of Navajo weaving, the adaptability of Navajo weavers going from chief blankets, weaving blankets for one another, weaving clothing, going into trading those blankets for other items with other tribal groups in the area, even non-native groups that came into the area, like the Spanish, and also when they're coming into American contact, that transition over to weaving for tourism, weaving weaving rugs that would be laid on the floor. So a lot of the rugs from the 50s and 40s, they were actually laid on floors in homes. But as we transition from that type of economy going to fine art, and that going in the direction of fine art, we see a lot of Navajo rugs now being hung on walls now, and versus being put on the floor, used as floor mats. And I've heard this one comment made by a rug, someone who was selling rugs in Albuquerque. The owner told me that Navajos don't weave the best rugs, but they weave the best blankets. And that was, I thought that was an interesting interesting take, and I didn't feel offended by it, but it the durability of a Navajo blanket was they were very highly durable. I've even heard some of the older pieces were even waterproof or watertight, and they would keep the wearer safe from water. And now we will go into my story, my own personal story. So I started learning how to weave in 2003 and 2004. I was around 9 or 8 years old. My mom was the one who knew how to weave Navajo and Pueblo style sash belts. So being the young kid that I was around her, a lot, and I'd always see her working all the time, weaving or spinning yarn, and that's how I got introduced to weaving in general. Weaving sash belts is very similar, it's a very similar idea to inkle weaving, and there's various styles of warp face weaving, and so that is the first style that I learned. And then in 2005, I took a summer weaving class out in the community of Two Gray Hills at the community school. There was an ad in the newspaper. And I saw it, told my parents I wanted to do it, and they took me out there probably like I think it was every Tuesdays and Thursdays. And this is the first weaving that I did on the screen. That's the very first rug that I did. I learned from a master weaver, Rose Blue Eyes, and I entered the rug into the Navajo Nation Fair, and it won second place that fall, I think. So there's a photo of me when I was young. I was at the last inch, arguably the hardest part of the weaving process, because we don't cut any of our weavings off the loom. They're all finished from complete to end. It's a continuous warp, so there's no cutting off the loom. You have to weave till the very end, till you don't see daylight through the other side. And and this is a photo after I had finished that first one. This was my second rug that I did. My neighbor here on the right side of the photo, she was the one who taught me how to create the warp, to do the figure eight, bind the warp strings and then lace it onto a dowel. And one of the big things that I want to point out too is that weaving is a community-based art form for a lot of Navajo people. A lot of Navajo weavers, they learn it from someone in their family or someone in the community. Prior to 2010, I believe, a lot of times it was very rare to find or to take a weaving class. Prior to the 2000s, 2010, very rare to have weaving classes. Nowadays, you see a lot of there's a good handful of people who are doing Navajo weaving classes within the Southwest. Here's a photo of me weaving a sash belt. And these are what I call the greats. These are my great grandmothers. My paternal grandmother is on the far right. She went to school, did her thing. She didn't learn how to weave or anything, but her mothers did, and her aunts did. So the rugs behind that are displayed behind these ladies are the rugs that they had woven. And yeah, my great grandmothers, and my uncle is down at the bottom. One of my uncles is down, the little boy at the bottom with the goat. So yeah, and this is a photo of my mom's side of the family. They are amazing people. They all know how to silversmith, make Navajo jewelry, silversmith, and they all know how to weave. And so they all had a hand, all the women had a hand in what I create today and how I create it. They give me advice and, tips on what to do and how to do it, telling me how their mom did it. And then my uncles, they play a huge role in learning the cultural aspect, the stories behind weaving, Navajo weaving, and giving me the confidence to do it basically, and giving me validation, saying that not only women weave, but men can weave too as well. So there's this notion that only women weave, only women do that, deal with the weaving and the spinning. But as I am growing up more, getting older, I'm learning from a lot of elders that, men were a part of the process just as much as the women were. They were, shearing the sheep, they were carding wool, cleaning wool with their mothers, their grandmothers. They were spinning wool for them, even down to knitting ceremonial items. So, a lot of times when we think of, gender roles, there was, everyone was a part of their work. There was no such thing as, gender roles, and we did what we did to aid in our survival. And this is a photo of me at one of my looms. Right here on this piece was one of my wedge weaves, one of my more experimental wedge weaves. So we'll be getting into what I've been working on, what I primarily do nowadays. And that is back to rug dresses. I love doing rug dresses. I love seeing these pieces that I create being worn and being utilized. And one thing that I realize is that a lot of my pieces are going to outlive me. When I pass, a lot of my pieces will still be in possession, and they'll be passed down from generation to generation, as so long as the family takes care of these items. And it always brings me, great joy that these families, they come to me and they approach me and they ask me to weave for them, and they agree, we agree on what type of payment is made. And so yeah, so this is one of my favorite rug dress, one of my recent rug dresses too. I post a lot of my stuff on Instagram and Facebook. So if you are friends with me, you will probably be seeing a lot of these photos here today. And in a lot of the photos that I take of my rug dresses, there'll always be a Shiprock rock behind it. So Shiprock rock is the famous pinnacle of, really well known in the southwestern area of the United States. And a lot of my dresses, I do the dye work on the colors, on the various colors, except for the black. The black is mainly an acid dye. So, yeah, a lot of these dresses are in happy homes, in happy hands right now. And I'm very glad to see a lot of people, returning back to the rug dresses. And I will get into sash belt weaving. Sash belt weaving is, like I said in the beginning, one of my very first art forms. one of my very first weaving techniques that I learned. My mom was a very incredible sash belt weaver. She doesn't weave now because she has arthritis in her hands, and weaving sash belt is very difficult on our hands in general. Excuse me. And so a lot of Navajo weavings and weavings in general in the Southwest, by indigenous cultures, are done on an upright vertical loom, which does provide a lot of symbology dealing with the moisture, with rain, the different elements like thunder, lightning, and also, the earth and the sky. And so what I've been taught was, every time we weave, every time we sit at the loom, we are asking it's a prayer for rain, it's a prayer for snow, for any type of moisture to come into the Southwest. Because where we live at in the Southwest is a very dry and arid area. And so, any moisture that we can get is appreciated, and we're very grateful for it. And sash belts are worn in Navajo culture, some sash belts are worn mainly by the women. Very rarely will you see sash belts being worn by Navajo men. It's very different in our neighboring our neighbors, the Pueblos, the Hopis and Zunis. The men and women will wear the sash belts, but for Navajos it's strictly for women. And not only are they used for personal adornment, like as a belt, but they're also used in birthing practices where they'll hang the sash belt from the top of the home, the hogan, the dwelling that they're living in, and the women will use the hogan, use the sash belt and hold themselves up while they're giving birth. And I've had the privilege of having some of my pieces being, some of my sash belts being used in that way, and it's very humbling to know that the belts that I'm weaving are being used for their traditional purpose, their functional purpose. And are some of the other belts that I've done. And I have this running joke that, Navajo women love their long fringes on sash belts. So when I make sash belts, the fringes are going to be around 20 to 24 inches long, very long compared to our neighbors, the Pueblos and the Hopis. In my experience, they don't have very long fringes on their belts. And here are more sash belts that I've done. So red, green, and white are very considered traditional Navajo sash belts in Navajo society. Very rarely will you see different color belts on Navajo women wearing pieces like that. And we get into probably the most fun part of my art right now, wedge weave. So little history about wedge weave. Wedge weave is a technique done back started in the mid 1800s. So 1850, 1870 was a time range that it had been created, and it is a Navajo innovation. Navajos, somehow figured it out. We figured it out somehow and ran with it. And so, I've heard different instances, historians saying that Navajos didn't know how to weave diagonally or create diagonal angles. So, that's why they created wedge weave. I don't know, it's up for debate. We don't really know why it came about. But wedge weave went out of existence for a very long time because of the trading post systems. The trading post systems, they wanted the perfect weaving. They wanted completely straight sides. They wanted it to lay flat. Wedge weave kind of depends on how you make it, kind of goes against everything else, kind of goes against all of that. It's outside of the box, outside of that box. Has scalloped edges, excuse me, on the sides. It's also known as a pulled warp. If you look closely at a wedge weave piece, and I wish I had added a photo of that, but you'll actually see the warp strings in the textile itself are all pulled at an angle in each row. And that's what, that's what it has. That's why it has that name of a pulled warp. And in this piece, I used cochineal, madder root, and logwood. And a lot of my pieces do have a really pronounced scallop on the sides. Sometimes I'll have them, sometimes I won't have them, just as I go along further in the PowerPoint. So this is one of the pieces with a very subtle scallop. This was all done in indigo that I had done a couple months ago. Very beautiful piece. I'm still learning, still wanting to do a lot more with wedge weave. This is probably the piece, this piece right here is a revival Navajo wedge weave. That's what I titled it. It's reminiscent of the old 1800s wedge weaves, which were primarily done in cochineal and indigo. A lot of weavings back then were done in cochineal and indigo. So this entire piece is done with cochineal and indigo, except for the white stripes, white zigzags. This piece was the one that garnered a lot of attention and brought, turned eyes towards me. It brought me a lot of attention in terms of, where I was headed in my weaving. When I first started learning how to weave from Roy Cady, the master Roy Cady, one of the things that he told us was weave what you want to weave. He says, you don't have to weave regional style. You don't have to weave two gray heels or anything. He says, they've been done beautifully. But, as the next generation is coming up, this younger generation is coming up, it's up to you to carry on and push, keep progressing Navajo weaving into something else. So I went back and I did this revival piece as to pay homage to that, to our ancestors, and see where I go next. This is another example. This was what I had left over from that big piece. The yarn that I had left over, I wove this small little piece. This was also a piece that I was experimenting on. I wanted to see how high of a wedge I could get, with each, how big of a scallop I could get on the wedge. So I think it was about, each row was probably about 6 or 7 inches. Yeah, I believe so. To me, that was a pretty big jump from my other wedge weaves that I had done. They were very smaller scallops, but this one was arguably the biggest a piece that has the biggest scallops on it. And very rarely will I weave a big piece without the scallops. The scallops are what make a wedge weave. In my opinion, it makes it a wedge weave. And people tend to get wedge weave mixed up with an eye dazzler rugs. They're in their separate category. But in wedge weaving, it is in its own category, just in how the technique, the way it's woven. Here's a piece that I did in all natural wool. The colors, all natural colors that came directly from the fleeces of the sheep. Here's another wedge weave that I did with very, very subtle scallops. This was a smaller piece as well. And we are getting into, this was, my most experimental wedge weave. This piece you're looking at was the very first time that I had ever done a twill weave inside of a wedge weave, combining both of them. You can see on the bottom half of the rug of the wedge, there's a small tiny stripe of diamond twills. So this is the first instance that I had done. The Denver Art Museum had purchased this from me, and it's displayed at the moment right now in their exhibits in the Indigenous Arts gallery. One of the curators, John Lukovic, he posted this photo on his Instagram, and he mentioned that this may be the first instance in history of a twill inside of a wedge weave. So if that's true, I'm pretty proud of myself. I was very scared to do that, to do that piece, but I knew there was, bigger and better things that I was going to be, more bigger things that I was going to be creating. And that is this piece. This piece, the wedge weave that's all in a twill weave. I had been wanting to do this piece since 2014. I had learned wedge weave from Roy Cady, and I also learned twill weaving from Roy Cady. And I knew I had to combine the two. I didn't know when I was going to do it. Leading up to the past 6 years, just honing down on my skill with wedge weave, and we're memorizing all of these twill counts, in my mind. And this was what came out of it, all those years, those patient years. And it was, it was pretty nerve-wracking, to be honest, making this. I was scared, but it was, you do it or you don't. And I somehow managed to do it. I figured it out, and yeah, it was a fun piece to weave. It was a very fun piece to weave. And the scallops, I really loved how the scallops came out. They came out more as like a subtle wave versus, my other pieces where it's a sharp scallop on each end. This one was a nice subtle wave. And yeah, and here's a up close look at it. This is not a regular twill that you see that, in Navajo weaving. This is known as a broken diamond twill. Also in Navajo, we call it na shon'i de chiji be'i mus, which translates to the horned toad's twill. The horned toad is the one that gifted us this twill design. And in Navajo culture, they say that I've been taught that all the reptiles, the snakes, the lizards, they are the ones who gave us the technique, the twill technique. They taught us these techniques. And a lot of times when you look at a twill, you can kind of see, like the diamonds remind you of like a diamondback rattlesnake, or stuff like that. And this is a photo of when I first started it. In the bottom corner, I had started off with a diagonal twill because I was kind of, very hesitant. I was kind of, dipping my toes in the water again. And then, I just said, I have to do it. So I counted out the broken diamond twill. I've counted out the strings. I laced them up, and I started it. And yeah, it was very difficult. And I'll go back to this video this photo. I had the hardest time matching up all the diamonds, where the joints are at. And I didn't want them to be, off from one each other. I wanted them to all line up. So you kind of look at it, it reminds me of a kaleidoscope effect almost. And this is what my loom setup looks like. Vertical upright loom. This is the weaving. This is a photo of the weaving that I did of the twill wedge weave combination. And this is what my messy little studio looks like. String everywhere, and yeah, when I'm not weaving, I tend to cover up a lot of my projects. The sheet on top of there's sheets on top of the loom that I'll bring down, and I cover my loom with. It's very simple. There's nothing too fancy about it. I love how, it's makes for good space. Our looms make for good space. They're not too big, unless, yeah. This is another photo of my loom setup. I like to use those ties at the top versus using an actual rope. It gives me better tension. I have more control over tension with those ties. And this is one of my bigger projects that I've been working on too as well. I haven't completed it yet, but I'm working on it. And in our warping practices, a lot of our warps are created horizontally. A lot of times they're on the ground, placed on the ground horizontally, and we use a figure 8 when we're warping it. And we do, and like I said, it's a continuous warp. There's nothing that's cut off the loom. It's all one continuous string for the warp. And we bind them at the bottom and the top, and we lace that binding to the dowel sticks, And my dye processes right now for the past 5-6 years, I've been addicted to cochineal and indigo. I very rarely will do natural plant dyes. I stick to what I love. Up in the top left-hand corner is cochineal, all cochineal, and some logwood, but those are the various colors that I got from cochineal. Down at the bottom left are indigo. I love indigo. It's amazing dye to work with. If you haven't worked with it already, you have to try it. Both of these dye processes with cochineal and indigo are very, I consider them very, you're very involved with that process. A lot of chemistry goes into a lot of things. So as I, learning all these art form, or learning everything about weaving, all these chemistry, learning how to be an artist, being a shepherd, all these things combined in one big ol', I guess, part of the resume of being a weaver. And then this is a photo of some acid dyes that I did. I felt like I was betraying all of the natural dyes that I had worked with. I felt like I was cheating. No offense to anybody who does work with acid dyes, but it was a lot easier to get everything together. I just went to the trading post and I bought the dye packets. And yeah, I wasn't doing anything else. I just dipped the yarn in and I was like, yeah, works good. Beautiful colors though, beautiful colors came out. I'm not gonna lie, real nice colors came out. And indigo. This is the photo that Terry was talking about. The indigo, I have the ring on right now. It's my favorite ring, and all of the yarn that I had dyed with the various shades of indigo that I got. And this was probably the best thing that I had done over the summer. I had done a collaboration with the Navajo potter, and he created this pot hand coiled from clay from the reservation, and it was a magnificent pot. It was beautiful, and we actually got to use dye with that pot, dye yarn, and our first attempts were a failure. The second half of the day that we used the pot, we did indigo, and it was a complete success. You can see in the beginning, or at the end, the pot was changed color from the beginning, but it was a beautiful process because it was exciting to be a part of that process. And here's indigo flower with the, when I put the indigo, added the indigo in to the pot. There's some of the yarn that I did with my skull can. And prickly pear. Prickly pear is it was a pretty unique dye to work with. I had never done it before. I just learned from Roy Cady, seeing what he was doing anyways. And prickly pears out in Albuquerque area, Nopales cactus, and blended them, strained them, and stuck them into a pickle jar and let the sun do its thing. It was a sun-dyed project, so it was very exciting. It was a very beautiful color. It's more of like now I have it still. It's more, I haven't used it yet. It's more of like a muted violet color. And now onto the cotton that I grow. I got the seeds from a weaver in Zuni. He gifted us, a group of us, a lot of seeds. I took 12 initially and started from there. Very quick to grow. This cotton seed has a fast growing season. So these sprouts up in the top left-hand corner was only after 3 days. 3 days of, I put them in the plastic bag with a wet paper towel and hung it up in the window, and 3 days later they were already sprouting, and I was surprised. And in the bottom left-hand corner was after a week, and the big photo on the right is after probably about 2 weeks. So it was very exciting process to be able to, very different from getting your fiber from sheep. This one was, arguably probably a lot more tougher, in my opinion, to grow cotton. And here's what the seeds look like on the right. And there's the plant in all of its beauty. It was a very beautiful plant in my opinion. I was obsessed with it when they started growing and they started getting big to becoming big plants. And the bloom itself, and every morning when I was going into my garden, I was talking to the bees and telling them to go over to the cotton, talk to the cotton and go play with the cotton over there. But here's some of the plants that the little cotton patch that I did in my garden. Very beautiful plants. Very thankful for the individual who gifted me those seeds, and sharing, keeping those seeds alive is very important now more than ever. And here is after a successful first season of growing. I also got brown cotton seeds from a lady, wonderful lady named Rowan White. She gifted me brown cotton seeds that came from Peru in a seed exchange. And yeah, and here it is when I had carded it and spun it. I was amazed by how beautifully it spun. And I have my little spindle has a clay whorl, which is very different from my other spindles. And now on to the wool processing. This is me and my friend Alicio were hired to do a shearing job out in Chinle, Arizona. So this is the photo we were shearing for our family out in Chinle. Shearing is probably I want to say first that people think that weaving is the hardest part of the process, but it's actually everything before weaving. So shearing, cleaning the wool, carding it, that's the hardest part. Weaving is the fun part. And here's one of the sheep that I was shearing. I use hand shears. I still use the old school hand shears. I haven't upgraded up to the electric shears yet, but I'm pretty good at it, pretty good at the hand shears. And here's a photo of the Navajo fleece that is cleaned, washed and cleaned. That is just the natural color. It's not dirty, I promise. It's not dirty, it's just the natural color. Navajo fleeces have two coats. One is a short inner coat and one is a long outer coat. So dual fiber. It can be coarse, it can be very fine, depending on how you breed them. Very lustrous, I might add too. And here in the top left hand is wool that it's carded. My mom carded this batch for me. She wasn't doing anything, so I asked her to card it for me. Down in the bottom left hand corner is a spindle. Navajo spindles, fully loaded with wool that I had spun. And this is a little time lapse video that I did of me carding and spinning wool. I was watching TV at the same time, so that's why I keep looking up. But it's a little time lapse video. So a lot of these photos, I do a lot of the self documentation by myself. I don't have anybody else who I kind of feel embarrassed asking people like, oh, take my photo. So a lot of these are my own self documentation. And yeah, that's how. It's not that fast, it's slower. It's just a time lapse. And now we get into my sheep. I started my flock about a year ago. This is my first year lambing too. You can see my little lambs right here. They were all born a day apart. I had a set of twins and two other lambs. They were all ram lambs. I was hoping to get little girls, little ewe lambs, but they're all ram lambs. The bottom right, my dad names all the lambs so far. He's named them. I try not to name them because I don't want to get too attached because we might end up selling them or they become we end up butchering them. So it's sad when you butcher your own lamb or your own sheep that you named. So I tend not to name them, stray away from that. And here are some other lambs. I had two over last summer. I got two ram lambs, recurring theme ram lambs, twins, black ones. Well, they're brown. They're actually brown now. Here's what my young flock looks like, my young herd. Um, and one cool thing to note is that Navajo rams, they are known to produce or known to have more than 2 horns. So down in the bottom left-hand corner, he has 4 horns, a 4-horn ram. And our journey up the mountain begins in June. I've been helping out Roy Katie for the past 5 or 6 years now, following the sheep up the mountain for the summer. They move them up for summer grazing where it's cooler. There's more grass up there in that area. A sheep herder stays up there with them all the time, so they're not left alone. There are predators up there, bears, coyotes. Sometimes, occasionally, you know, a wolf will come through, but not too very often. I know last year I personally lost two ewes to a bear, which was very disappointing. But it was very, you know, surprising too. It's kind of scary. So here's our journey up the mountain. It's probably about 12 miles up to the summer sheep camp. And here's probably about a quarter of the way. We're down in the canyon. It's a video so you can hear, hopefully you can hear what's going on. So yeah, we usually stop at this point in the canyon for about an hour to let the sheep rest and for them to drink some water. But a lot of the veteran sheep, the older ewes, they know once we get up to that part, they know where we're going, and you know they start traveling up by themselves. And this is probably the hardest part of the hike, is this upward incline along the ridge of the mountain. And they stay in line with the older ewes leading. Some of the younger ewes will run up the hill, but they come down eventually. And here's another video when we get up to the top. We get up to the top, and from there it's just all one go, one straight shot. So yeah, there's usually a group of us that go up together. Usually the people who are combining their flock. So this isn't just one person's flock. It's about 4 different individuals who want to take their herd up for the mountain. They share expenses and they take up water for the sheep herder, food and all that. Here's a shot from the mountain where we got them safely up to the summer grazing area, and we let them hang out, let them graze, and we mosey on over, the rest of us mosey on over to the cabin and get something to eat, drink, and later in the evening we get to bring them back in to the corral. And here is a nice shot that I got during the summer monsoon. Summer monsoon was rolling in, and there's the corral that we have. So they get shade during the day when they come in for lunch, and they get to rest under the shade. But most of the time, they spend a lot of their time out grazing, eating up as much as they can, getting happy and fat. And here they are up in the mountain in the grazing area. And these are the people who are responsible for the summer grazing. Roy Katie is is the gentleman on the left or the right hand photo. He's in the middle with the red plaid jacket on. The rest of the younger guys are all comrades, friends who have been a part of this journey, and they are also, you know, really good weavers themselves as well. weavers, shepherds. They do a lot of things. They're not just weavers, but they do a lot of things. And that concludes the end of my talk. I also want to give a shout out to Diné, the Navajo Lifeway. They are a nonprofit organization based on the Navajo Reservation. And another nonprofit that I want to shout out to is the Rainbow Fiber Co-op, another Navajo-led nonprofit. Both of these nonprofits do incredible work with the Navajo shepherds and Navajo weaving histories. And yeah.
I noticed that one of those sheep is a dog.
Oh yeah, it's a sheepdog. Yeah, it's a sheepdog.
Wow. That was just great, Kevin. I don't think I could imagine something even better than that. That was awesome. And you might not be surprised to know this, but there's like 20,000 questions. So
Yeah.
if any of you want to send questions, I'm only going to do them from Q&A, not chat. So if you really want to know the answer and you didn't get it there, now you have to do that. So I'm just going to start out with, do you make your own looms?
No, well, my dad used to make my looms for me. It wasn't until about 2015 I bought my first metal loom. If you're talking about the loom frame itself, yeah, I had those ones, the metal looms made. But if it's a wooden loom, I usually buy, my dad is the one that usually makes them.
Very good. Are the sash belt designs meaningful?
Yes, they are. They have different meanings, different designs. Yeah, it's just different designs. There's no specific, design that I can, off the top of my mind that I can share with. A lot of it I do share with, the family that does purchase the belts, but a lot of it is just, very personal.
Got it. Are the dresses worn only for ceremonial occasions?
They are worn for ceremonial occasions. They are worn for special events like graduations. Yeah, a lot of the dresses that I've woven are for graduations. I've done one dress for a ceremony, but yeah, so they can be used, whenever they please to use them. Yeah, if they wore them every day, I'd be even more happy.
Yeah, boy, that would be something to see. Do you spin your own warp?
My own warp, yes, I do. Warp string is very important to me. It's the basis of the weaving. So I like to be sure that it's going to be strong. If I buy it somewhere else, it tends to ravel as I get to the very last inch, and it's very difficult, and it's kind of frustrating at times. So it's better for me to do it myself. That way, if it messes up, I can be the one to blame.
Sure. And that last inch is hard enough as it is.
Yeah, it is.
Let's see. What did the Navajo use for weaving fiber before they started raising sheep?
I've heard of wild cotton being grown by itself in the southwestern area. Also, using the cliff rose bark. It's a very stringy bark. It's almost like how do you say? It's like a cedar bark. That's what we used to use for weaving. And prior to that, it was we were using animal hides, animal skins for clothing and blankets and stuff like that. But simple weaving technologies, we're using plant fibers like I just mentioned, the cedar, cliff rose bark, wild cotton. Yeah.
Very good. How heavy are the dresses?
I do not like to make them heavy. They are around probably about I want to say about 5 pounds each. I use thin yarn for them, for the dresses, so they're not very heavy, and they're very big. When I make them, and I measure the ladies that they're weaving them for, I make them big so that they can grow with them. If they're going through pregnancy, or they gain weight, stuff like that. Life happens, and you want the dresses to stay with the wearer for a very long time.
Oh, that's cool. I think you've already answered this question. Do you use hand spun yarn?
Not in all of my pieces. Most of my pieces I do use hand spun yarn, but in the dresses I do not use hand spun yarn because they take a lot of time to process. They're two separate panels that are woven together. So I like to use already, yarn that's already spun up.
Cool. How do you dye your pieces? How do you source the dye materials?
So cochineal and indigo are the two dye sources that I purchased from online. Those are the only two dyes that I purchased. The other dyes that when I work with them, it's a lot of it is seasonally. So during spring or fall, I'll pick plants to dye with. But other than that, so plants are done seasonally, when they're growing, they also produce different shades throughout their growing throughout the year. So yeah.
How large are your pieces typically?
I like to weave bigger pieces because there's more room. I feel like there's more room for me to create a design with. Smaller
Yeah.
pieces are, it seems like they take me longer to do, but they don't. I'm just probably dramatic about it. But a lot of my pieces are around, I want to say 3x4,
Okay.
3 feet by 4 feet, 36 inches by 36 inches, somewhere around that.
Okay. Oh, I lost the next question. Hang on. Oh, on the diamond twill weave, is that loose fringe tied on, or are the ends woven in? You know the answer.
On that piece, that's called a tufted technique. So I actually used locks of wool from my sheep, the fleeces that they have, pretty long locks, and they are woven in. They're not tied or anything. They're wrapped around like 3 or 4 warps at a time. So they stay in place, and yeah.
Do you work from a cartoon or pattern you draw beforehand, or is it all in your head?
Most of my pieces are in my mind. I don't see the design until I see the colors. So I have to have the colors in front of me, what color scheme I'm working with. And then after that, a lot of it is in my mind, or, I say, what the loom tells me to weave. When it comes to rug dresses, I will sketch out a design for the dress and I show it to the family, and if they like it, cool. But I tell them, this isn't concrete. It may possibly change as I start weaving. And that has happened a couple times actually. I start laying in the weft and everything, and I get it started, and all of a sudden everything changes, and I'm just like, I have to text the family and tell them, it changed itself. Like I can't see it any other way than this way. And usually the family agrees with me. So yeah.
That makes so much sense. Yeah, totally. They want to know if you use wool warp. I'm sure that you do.
Yes, I do.
And do you use singles as warp as well as weft?
Yes, I do. Singles are a Navajo. Yeah, it's a Navajo thing. Singles, everything, except for the warp binding. We ply the warp binding, the top and the bottom, with a 3-ply. Also known, I've heard it as Navajo ply, and then we also use 2-ply for the side cordings, the salvage cords.
Yes. Do you, is there a limit to the smallest feature that can be weaved, such as indigo white diamond illustrated earlier? That's I don't know the answer to that. I mean, obviously it has to go around the warps.
Yeah, I don't
not quite see that.
open.
So let's just move on past that one. It says, what do you use to spin the yarn? And you showed us your spindles.
Yeah, I use a lap spindle, and I also have a spinning wheel too as well. The wheel is a lot more quicker in my opinion. But
Yeah.
you know, but
If you can
the
make it
lap
run.
spindle, the lap spindle has, you have to practice a lot and have a lot of skill, and yeah, skill that involves using a lap spindle.
How do you prepare or finish your fibers to keep the colors from fading?
I use various mordants. I use alum, potassium. Sometimes I use copper. Um, you know, different type of metal mordants. I know they're not safe, but you know they produce really nice colors.
Sure. Um, can you tell us more how to care for cotton that has been dyed naturally?
I have not dyed with cotton yet. You know, that is a very good question that I will have to find out myself.
Yeah, I guess you will too, huh? Here's a hard one. What are your thoughts about cultural appropriation of the original designs of Navajo people?
I believe that when it comes to cultural appropriation, there's a very fine line that comes along with it because, you know, some of the designs that that, you know, when you go back to the original, you know, Navajo designs, they come from the trading posts. You know, the trading post was one that was influencing Navajo weavers. They were showing them pictures of Oriental weavings, old Oriental rugs. And so when you compare them both, look at them by side, you can kind of see there's a very similar, you know, patterns and all that. But when it comes to that, yeah, it's very hard in my opinion. I have, you know, one opinion about it, one opinion that, you know, is totally opposite. They contradict one another. Um, so it's a very hard topic to talk about.
It
Talk
is,
about it
and
all day. Yeah.
exactly, yeah. Well, thanks for that start anyway. That's a big conversation.
Yeah.
Here's a person who wants to know if you use a needle to weave those last couple of inches.
Yes, I do. A needle is very important in those last inches. I usually don't take out I usually take out the shed last or first, the shed stick. I'll take that out first and I'll leave the heddle in strung up till I get to like about half an inch. Then I'll finally take out the string for the heddle. But yeah, everything is done with the needle in those last inches.
A friend of mine was using her Navajo style loom, and she said, I wove this many inches in this many hours, and then at the top I wove this many inches in this many hours.
Yeah, we have this. I have this joke that I call the last inch, the 48-hour inch, because I did a
Exactly.
big piece. I did a big piece before, and it took me 48 hours to finish that last inch.
Gosh,
Yeah, it was brutal.
totally. Yeah. What's your next weaving challenge?
My next weaving challenge, I am going to try to attempt to do a two-face weaving with wedge weave. So
Oh,
yeah, so that's one of my other challenges that I've wanting to attempt. So I have two different wedge
yay.
weaves on one rug. So
Oh my gosh, I'd like to see that one.
yeah,
Do your sheep have camp fibers in addition to the long and short hairs?
no, they don't. My sheep don't. I don't like the Kemp at all. So I am trying to breed for no Kemp. I just want just the wool. When I spin with the Kemp always, you know, it's all over my lap and it's just really messy and it's just, I don't like it.
Do you use all of your fleece or do you sell some of it?
I use most of it. I try to use most of it. If I don't use, you know, the remnants of it, I usually use it in my garden as like a mulch, you know? Yeah.
Yeah. Is all your hand spun woolen spun as opposed to worsted spun?
You see, I still haven't understood, you know, the differences between the woolen and worsted. So
Yeah.
I don't know how to answer that question. I
How
would
about
say,
it's spun the way I was taught to work it?
yeah, it's Navajo spun. That's all I know.
There you go. Do you use different water sources for getting different colors from cochineal, or is it primarily skewing the pH with acids or basic ingredients?
Yes, I do. So if I've collected enough rainwater, I'll use rainwater. If I am able to go to a natural spring and collect the water from there. Um, I have hard water at home, so it's really difficult to get the reds that I want. I'll get the purples and the pinks and all that, and some peachy kind of colors. But yeah, it's also using the mordant that I'm using too as well.
Mhm.
So yeah, different water sources.
How do the Diné clean or skirt the wool that has just been shorn?
That so after it's shorn, you usually take off everything that has poop on it. I usually do that anyways. That's not clean, that has poop on it. I take all of that around the edges. If they're being fed in a pen and they have hay, I'll take all those parts out because it's just not, to me, it's not worth cleaning if there's a lot of
Mhm.
vegetal matter in it. It's always going to be in there if there's a lot, and it's very
True.
difficult to clean. So I try
Yeah.
to get the best parts of the fleece.
Thank you. How many ends per inch do you typically use in your wedge weave?
Another question I do not know the answer to. I usually do not, do any, warps per inch or weft per inch count. I weave what, yeah, I don't have any answer for that.
Well, that's interesting. I'm surprised to
Yeah.
hear that. Huh. Um, can you tell us again, without using share screen, the names of the two organizations, the Rainbow and the food one, Lifeway one?
So the Navajo Lifeway is, you can find the website at navaholifeway.org. It's a Navajo nonprofit dealing with shepherds, weavers. Yeah. And the other nonprofit is, oh, excuse me, rainbowfibercoop.org. So you'll find both of those websites very helpful. They support a lot of Navajo shepherds who raise Navajo churro sheep.
Okay. And your sheep are churro.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I have a couple of Angora goats too as well, but yeah, to put that in there.
So you said that the dresses were woven in two panels. Are they connected some way at the shoulder, or are they're literally part of one thing?
They are woven two separate panels side by side, and then they're woven on the side, right below the rib down to the knee, and then on top of the shoulder right here. They're sewn up,
Sewn together then.
sewn together. Yeah.
Oh, somebody wants to know what kind of spinning wheel you use.
I think I have an Ashford spinning wheel. It's a very old one. I got it as a gift from a friend in Santa Fe. She gave it to me when I was starting out, and yeah, I've been using it ever since. I want to buy a new a wheel, but I think I'd probably should stick to the one that I have.
Would it be appropriate for a non-native woman to wear your dresses?
uh, that is going to be a question, that depends a lot heavily on the family that you're getting the dress from. So Navajos, we're one big group. We all share a language and everything, but we're very diverse. So each, when going back to our clan systems, each clan has different stories for one thing. So you can ask, so I'm Kia'ani. We have one story for weaving. You can go to someone from the Mud Clan, and they'll tell you a different story, or a story that's similar, but there's slight differences to it. And so yeah, but for me personally, I think it's okay for a non-native woman to wear one of my dresses.
Cool. What kind of music do you listen to when weaving, if any?
I listen to podcasts. So I listen to true crime podcasts. Yeah. And I also listen to scary stories. So I find podcasts that play scary stories and late into the night when I'm weaving. Yeah, I listen to them.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Is it more challenging to do the last inch on a wedge weave?
No, it's not. So when I do all of my wedge weaves, there's a horizontal band that I start with at the bottom, and then there's a horizontal band that ends at the top. So I start and end with a regular plain weave, and then I'll do the wedge weave in that middle portion. So it's not very difficult.
Got it. Can you talk more about using prickly pear as dye stuff? Someone wanted to know if it was fugitive.
What do you mean fugitive?
Does the dye fade if you leave it out in the wrong
Yes.
place at the wrong time?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, it has. It's not very light fast. So if we do work with it, um, be very careful of of the sunlight and everything because it will fade. It'll fade slowly, but if you leave it out in the sun, it'll fade even quicker than that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks. Do you use only the long hair from the Chiro fleece for the hand spun warp?
No, I use the whole thing. I use both both fibers in that process in creating the warp. It makes it for a stronger warp string to blend both of the fibers together. Yeah.
Do you plan on using hemp fibers in the future?
Uh, I know Roy Katie has done it. My mentor, one of my mentors, he's done it. It came out really nice. I don't know if I ever will, to be honest, I don't know. I guess we'll just all have to wait and find out if I do.
There's only so much you can do any particular year, right?
Yeah.
Oh, this is similar to a previous question. Do you feel it is appropriate for a non-native to weave Navajo designs?
There are some things about that one that I will answer. Will answer. Um, I think it's perfectly fine for people, any type of, where your background you're coming from to weave Navajo style, weaving to, weave the designs that are known through in the Southwest, and learn it from individuals who practice it, like, take weaving classes from Navajo weavers themselves. That is perfectly okay. It is perfectly appropriate. What's not appropriate is if individuals start to make the weavings and market them as Navajo made. That actually is against the law, the Indian Arts and Crafts Act. Yeah, so there's I think it's perfectly okay. I think it's fine, in my opinion.
Thank you. And that's an important distinction.
Yeah.
You cannot make things from native crafts and say that you're a native if you're not. Hello? Yeah. How long do you weave each day?
So that really depends on a lot of things. If I am feeling up to it, if I'm motivated, some days I will be busy, just busy all morning, doing chores, cleaning and all that stuff. And then I'll weave in the afternoon till, midnight. Or if I don't weave all day, I'll weave, I'll start around 7 or 8 and I'll weave into the night, go to sleep probably like around 1 or 2. It just depends on what's going on throughout my day. I know in the beginning, back in 2014 and 15, I was cranking out like 12-hour days. I was weaving like nonstop, and it would kind of became very unhealthy for me. And yeah, so I had to kind of like realize that and step back and balance out my day.
Yep. And that'll get worse when you get older. Do you have a project in mind for your hand spun cotton?
Yes, I do. I've been wanting to grow enough cotton to create a sash belt fully from cotton and dye it red, dye it green, and all of that. So I'm very excited. This season, I'm planning to grow as much cotton as I can so I can get enough fiber to produce at least one belt from it.
Cool. Wow. Um, let's see. Where in the world have your tapestries found homes? Like Asia or
Mm,
Europe?
one of my weavings found a place in China. So
Oh,
I think
cool.
that was the furthest place that one of my weavings have gone. Um, yeah, most of it, yeah, China's the only one, then the rest of it is here in the United States.
Did a silversmith from your family make your wonderful ring?
I got this ring as part of a trade for a rug dress. So the
Oh,
family, they got this ring and they traded me for a rug dress. Not only the ring for the rug dress, but they paid cash, other pieces, um, paid in cash, and they also got me this ring. So it's a pretty cool ring. It's one of my favorites.
yeah, I'd say. Someone wanted to know if you'll be in the Indian market at Santa Fe.
No, I will not. Not this year. I will not be there this year. I have some very important planning or family planning events that we're going on this fall. So I'm going to be busy during that weekend.
Okay. How many cotton plants would it take to produce enough cotton for a sash belt?
It just depends on how much cotton boils are going to be, produced on the plant itself. Um, so far, I kind of believe it might take more than 50 plants for the to take a belt to make a belt. Um, so yeah,
Do you get all of your yarn spun and dyed before you begin a project?
yes, I do. It's just I think it's a lot easier and it's not as messy. Um, I've dyed fleeces before, spinning and carding and spinning, and it was very messy. And I had, I guess I agitated the wool too much, and it some of it felted, and yeah, it was kind of a mess.
I hate that part.
Yeah,
Do you teach or give workshops?
I do not, I do not teach or do workshops. I think I feel like I'm too young right now, and people just don't take me seriously just yet. So I just I kind of just tend to stand back away from shy away from workshops at for the time being. Um, but in our community itself, we have um, spin-off workshops, community workshops where they're free, and I'll go and offer my advice here and there, and if someone wants to learn, I'll sit there with them and explain to them how to do it. But they're free workshops, free community event. It's very very intimate event too. So yeah.
Someone wants to know where you market your pieces.
So a lot of times I do post a lot of my pieces on Instagram, and Instagram is probably the main one. So if you see anything that I'm working on Instagram, if you follow me on Instagram, um, yeah, if you follow me on Instagram and you see a piece that I'm working on that I posted, you can feel more than, or how do I say it? You can reach out and ask if it's available.
There you go. Contact
Yeah,
me.
yeah, just contact me. And I have a
This
website
question,
too as well. So
yes. Say that one. I forgot it right now.
my website is kevinaspaastextiles.com. So it's just
Well,
my
that's
full
a tricky
name,
one.
textiles.com. Yeah.
Got it. And it's ASPAAS, not ASS.
Yeah. Yeah. Two A's.
This might be uncomfortable, so you don't have to answer it if you don't want to. How do you determine the monetary value of a piece?
A lot of it is time. and experience. So how much time I've spent learning how to do that technique, kind of ultimately determines how I'm going to price it. But time does take a lot, because it is a lot of time. It takes a lot of time to create these pieces.
Yes, it does. Very true. Especially if you add in the fact that you had to start with a sheep and end up with a rug,
Yeah.
A lot of us just buy yarn. So that adds at least 100%, if not 200% of the time.
So I have to also think about my sheep. They're putting in more of the work than I am, because they're the ones producing the wool. So
good point.
Taking care of them, making sure they're happy. Yeah. And plus oh, go ahead, sorry.
Oh, no, you talk. I interrupted, please.
Oh yeah, and then the price of hay is going up, so I had to think about that. So now those things are factoring into my pieces now. So yeah.
Can you say more about Spider-Woman and Spider-Man?
They are our holy people, our deities that we pray to, and they are the ones who gifted us the art form of weaving, through a cultural aspect. They are the ones responsible for teaching us. Spider-Woman was the one who taught us how to weave. Spider-Man was the one who he was the one who created the tools, the weaving tools. So what I've been told is that he made a set of weaving tools for men, and then he's made a set of weaving tools for women. They're the same tools, but they're made of different material items that are sacred to Navajo people, and people in the Southwest, indigenous cultures in the Southwest. Shells, stones, shells and stones. So they are the ones that are responsible for teaching us how to weave. They gave us taught us, the mechanics of it, the technology. And, when I say technology, it very much was technology. It is technology. It's a very primitive technology that hasn't changed very much in the past 500 years, or since we've been weaving. It's all been the same thing, but our availability to different materials, like metal nowadays, a lot of weavers have metal looms. They use straps instead of a rope to do tension. But they are deities who, they're responsible for bringing us the art of weaving.
Very cool. Let's see. Do you plan to gin your cotton or spin it off of the seed?
I'm planning to gin the cotton. I've tried spinning it off the seed, and it was very, very difficult. Yeah, it was very difficult, but ginning the cotton is probably my best bet. Most likely my best bet.
I don't even know what that means, but sounds good to me.
Yeah.
Are there many young weavers in your community?
I know one other young weaver in my community, but throughout the Navajo Nation, there's a good handful of weavers that I know personally that I've met and I've talked to, all under the age of 30. So there could be more younger weavers out there, but what we have is what we're dealing with right now. We're all really supportive of one another. All the young ones are, we see each other on Instagram and Facebook, and tell each other good job, or those are beautiful. And yeah.
Cool. How many sheep do you plan to have in your herd, and will they always be churro, or will you get other breeds?
So right now I have about 20. Yeah, about 20 sheep. And when I first started, I thought I told myself, oh, I'll probably have 5 or 6, and then that number just jumped up to 20 within the year. And I'd like to have more. To be honest, I'd love to have a bunch of sheep, but with the drought that we have, the price of hay, and plus on the reservation, you have to have a grazing permit to graze your animals out in the pasture. So I currently don't have a grazing permit for my sheep. So they're just in a big corral. But I want to, see how big of a herd I can manage, and upkeep. And if it becomes too much, then, obviously I'll have to reduce. But 50 at the most, right now thinking 30, 20 is a good number right now for me to manage by myself. But yeah, I'll
50.
probably, yeah, so I'll probably stick to Navajo churros. Navajo churro, they're a very tough, hardy breed. When it came to lambing, I didn't really have to worry too much about them. They are great mothers, very great mothers. I posted a video on my Instagram of one of the ewes, the
Oh, yeah.
mom. She had the twins, and she kept stomping at me, and she was doing a double stomp with both of her front hooves. And I got in the pin with her, and she was really like protective of her babies, and she knocked me over in the pin. And it was a very small pin, like close, very close. But yeah.
I saw that video. It made me think, boy, I'm glad she hasn't grown any horns.
Yeah, me too.
How did COVID-19 affect your work?
Oh my gosh, like I didn't realize how much affected my work, but from the start of the pandemic from 2020 to about 2021, mid 2021, I realized I had not done a wedge weave for an entire year. Like I didn't realize how much that it affected my work. And I do wedge weaves all the time, and it was just like last year I realized like I had done a wedge weave. What the heck? And I had a small loom, and I just hurried up and warped up, made a warp, and I started doing a wedge weave, and I was like, dang, I missed weaving wedge weave. But a lot of it slowed down, very much slowed down. I did have to rely a lot on my community because a lot of the shows were closed. So I did have to rely on my community to support me. And in the support, I made smaller pieces, and they were, people were buying the pieces from me, and I was able to support, make money that way. And so I'm very, very thankful that they were there to support me in that manner. So it did affect me. And this last fall in August was my first show back, and this past spring, a couple weeks ago, in Phoenix was my first herd market too. So very exciting, very happy to be back, and yeah.
Yay. And that's when Herd took your twill, right? Your wedge
Yeah.
weave twill.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah, it was exciting.
Do you wash your wool before spinning or spin it raw?
I usually wash it before spinning. I do not don't very much like the grease. Like when it's raw, when you're spinning wool raw, there's a lot of grease on it. And yeah, it's just, so I wash it before I spin it. But there are some instances where you can spin straight from the fleece, the whole Navajo churro fleece. But yeah.
Wow. Just if you could talk the sheep into just standing there, right? And you just cut off a little and no, never
Yeah.
mind. Someone would like to know the meaning of the figures and colors used in your designs.
A lot of my creative creativity, yeah, there you go. Creativity comes from the land and being out on the landscape. Those are what really inspire a lot of my work and my designs. So yeah.
Very good. I'm going to stop now because, this would go on forever. But there's still 300 people here.
Yeah.
But we were kind of thinking of an hour, and it's been an hour and a half plus. So if people wanted to contact you, obviously they should do so through Instagram, Facebook, or your website.
Yeah. Yes.
All good
So
choices, easy to find.
yeah. So all of my Instagram is just my name, Kevin Aspaas, Facebook, Kevin Aspaas, and yeah, my website, kevinaspaastextiles.com.
Great, loved it. This has really been fun, Kevin. I know we've talked several times, but just hearing the rest of the story was really interesting. And I'm going to ask Maggie to leave the episode on after we're done so that you can read through some of the 91 chats that are sitting there, because you got lots and lots of compliments. So I'm going to say goodbye to everybody. Thank you, Kevin. Thanks, Maggie, for setting this up. Thanks to everybody for coming. It's been great. We hope to see you at the next ambassador program, which should be sometime this fall. So everybody that's not you, or you can leave now. And thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you.